The first snow of December fell over West Virginia just as Bernice Davison ran through the airport doors, one hand gripping her suitcase and the other clutching her phone. "Please don't do this to me," she whispered. She was supposed to be home in Wisconsin by evening. Home. The word alone made her chest ache. For the past 8 months, Bernice had been buried beneath work, deadlines, and responsibilities in West Virginia. She had promised her parents that this Christmas would be different. She would sit at her mother's kitchen table, eat too much of her father's famous holiday cooking, help decorate the tree, and wake up on Christmas morning in the little house where she had grown up. Her mother had already sent her a dozen messages. "Don't forget your red sweater. Your father is pretending he isn't excited. I made your favorite pie." Bernice had smiled at every message. Now, standing beneath the departure board, she wanted to cry. Her flight had been canceled. A winter storm had moved across the region faster than expected, grounding several flights and leaving hundreds of passengers stranded. No, no, no. She hurried to the airline counter. "Excuse me," she said breathlessly. "Is there another flight to Wisconsin tonight?" The exhausted attendant shook her head. "I'm afraid not. The earliest available flight is tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow?" Bernice stared at her. "But Christmas is tomorrow." "I know. I'm sorry." Bernice stepped away from the counter, fighting tears. Tomorrow afternoon meant missing Christmas morning with her parents. It meant arriving after the breakfast her mother had planned and after her father had probably given up pretending he wasn't waiting by the window. She lowered herself onto a bench and stared at her phone. Her mother's name appeared again. Bernice answered. "Hi, Mom." "Bernice, sweetheart, where are you?" Bernice swallowed. "I'm still at the airport." There was silence. Then her mother sighed softly. "The flight. Cancelled." "Oh, baby." Those 2 words nearly broke her. "I'll figure something out," Bernice promised. After ending the call, she searched desperately for buses, trains, rental cars, anything. Nothing looked promising. Then a message appeared in the airport travel group. "Anyone heading toward Wisconsin tonight? Willing to share a ride and split expenses." Bernice hesitated. Traveling hundreds of miles with a stranger was not exactly her idea of Christmas magic. But missing Christmas with her parents felt worse. Before she could respond, someone approached her. "Excuse me." Bernice looked up. The man standing before her seemed completely out of place in the chaotic airport. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a charcoal coat, black trousers, and polished shoes. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the weather, and his expression was calm despite the disorder around them. He was Korean, probably in his late 30s, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. "I saw your post," he said. "My post? The ride to Wisconsin." Bernice blinked. "Oh, yes. My driver is taking me north. We have enough room for another passenger." She studied him carefully. "You're going to Wisconsin?" "Milwaukee." Her heart jumped. "I'm going to Madison. That's on our route." Bernice glanced toward the glass doors. Snow was falling harder now. "What would you charge?" "Nothing." She frowned. "Nothing? You need to get home for Christmas." "So do I." There was something unexpectedly sincere about his answer. Still, Bernice wasn't careless. "Who are you?" The slightest smile touched his lips. Woo Sung Kong. The name meant nothing to her. Apparently, it should have. Woo Sung was one of the most successful young CEOs in South Korea, the billionaire founder of a technology company that had expanded into the United States. But Bernice had spent the past year deliberately avoiding business news. She had no idea who was standing in front of her. And strangely, Woo Sung seemed to like that. "Bernice Davison," she said. "I know." Her eyebrows lifted. "You know?" He nodded toward her suitcase. "Your name is on the tag." She laughed despite herself. "Right?" For the first time that evening, the tension in her shoulders eased. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Woo Sung picked up her suitcase before she could protest. "Come on, Bernice. We have a long road ahead." She followed him toward the exit. Neither of them knew it yet, But that unexpected car ride through the winter darkness would change both their lives. Because sometimes Christmas miracles don't arrive on time. Sometimes they arrive in a stranger's car. The black SUV waited outside the airport, its headlights glowing through the thick curtain of snow. Bernice stopped beside it. "You said your driver was taking you," she said. Woo Sung opened the passenger door. "He was. But the roads are getting worse, so I sent him to a hotel." Bernice looked at him suspiciously. "You're driving." "I can drive." "That wasn't exactly what I expected." "What did you expect?" She glanced at his expensive coat and polished shoes. "A driver, perhaps. Maybe a private jet." For the first time, Woo Sung laughed. It was a surprisingly warm sound. "You're very direct. My mother says it's one of my worst qualities." Perhaps she's wrong. Bernice smiled before climbing into the SUV. The interior was warm, spacious, and smelled faintly of leather and pine. Woo Sung placed her suitcase in the back before taking the driver's seat. As they pulled away from the airport, Bernice watched the familiar lights disappear behind them. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't exactly natural either. Finally, Woo Sung broke it. "Why Wisconsin? My parents live there." "That sounds obvious." She laughed. "You asked. I meant, why are you so desperate to get there tonight?" Bernice looked through the window. "Because I haven't been home for Christmas in 3 years." Woo Sung glanced at her. 3 years. "I've been busy. With work." "Yes. What do you do?" "I manage communications for a non-profit organization." He nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds important." "It doesn't feel important when you're sitting in an airport watching your Christmas disappear." Woo Sung smiled faintly. "Maybe getting there tomorrow isn't the end of the world." "It is to my mother." That made him laugh again. "She sounds frightening." "She is." Bernice's smile faded into something softer. "But she's also wonderful." She told him about her mother, her father, and the small family traditions they had kept alive since she was a child. Her father always woke up early on Christmas morning. Her mother always made far too much food. And every year, her parents argued playfully about where to place the star on the Christmas tree. Woo Sung listened without interrupting. "You miss them," he said eventually. "Very much." "What about you?" Bernice turned toward him. "What about me? Where's your family?" His hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. "In Seoul." "Are you going home for Christmas?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Bernice noticed. "Why?" "I have work." She studied his profile. "You sound like someone who has been using work as an excuse for a long time." Woo Sung raised an eyebrow. "Are you always this honest with strangers?" "Only the ones driving me across several states." He smiled. "I suppose that's fair." They continued north. As the hours passed, the two strangers began discovering small pieces of each other's lives. Bernice learned that Woo Sung loved classical music, hated crowded restaurants, and had learned to cook because his grandmother believed every successful man should know how to prepare at least one proper meal. Woo Sung learned that Bernice loved old Christmas movies, kept handwritten letters from her parents in a box beneath her bed, and had once wanted to become a travel photographer. "Why didn't you?" he asked. She shrugged. "Life happened." "That isn't an answer." "It's the only one I have." Around midnight, the snow became heavier. Woo Sung slowed the vehicle. Then suddenly the SUV slid slightly. Bernice grabbed the door handle. "Oh!" Woo Sung immediately steadied the vehicle. "You okay?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes." She looked at him. He was calm, but his jaw had tightened. "We should stop somewhere," he said. A few minutes later, they found a small roadside lodge surrounded by snow-covered pine trees. The parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, the elderly woman at the reception desk looked at them sympathetically. "Storm's getting worse," she warned. "You shouldn't continue tonight." Woo Sung glanced at Bernice. She nodded. "One room." The woman smiled. "I have 2 rooms left." "2?" Woo Sung said immediately. Bernice almost laughed. "I wasn't going to suggest one." "I know." They took separate rooms. But before Bernice disappeared down the hallway, Woo Sung called her name. She turned. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For reminding me that Christmas isn't just another day." Her expression softened. "Maybe you needed reminding." She walked into her room. Woo Sung remained in the hallway for several seconds, staring after her. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his company, acquisitions, investors, or the next deal. He was thinking about a woman he'd met only hours ago, and wondering why he already didn't want the journey to end. Bernice woke to the sound of someone knocking gently on her door. She opened her eyes and stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then everything returned. The canceled flight, the snowstorm, Usung, the road to Wisconsin. She sat up quickly and checked her phone. There were several messages from her mother. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you safe? Don't worry about getting here until you can. Your father says the turkey is waiting for you." Bernice smiled. It was Christmas morning. She opened the door and found Woo Sung standing outside with 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning." She looked at the coffee. "You brought me coffee? I didn't know how you took it." "So you guessed. I ordered 1 black and 1 with cream." She smiled. "Cream." He handed it to her. "Then I guessed correctly." Bernice took a sip. "Thank you." Outside the window, snow covered everything. The storm had transformed the world into a quiet white landscape. Woo Sung checked his phone. "The roads are still dangerous. The highway patrol recommends waiting until later this morning." Bernice sighed. "How long?" "Maybe a few hours." She looked disappointed. Woo Sung noticed. "You really want to be there this morning?" "I promised my mother." "Then let's make the most of the delay." "How?" He pointed toward the reception area. "The woman downstairs mentioned there's a small town about 10 minutes from here. Apparently they have a Christmas market." Bernice laughed. "On Christmas morning?" "Apparently. Are you suggesting we go sightseeing?" "I'm suggesting we stop staring at snow through windows." She considered it, then smiled. "Okay." 20 minutes later, they walked through the quiet streets of the little town. Colorful Christmas lights hung across the main street, sparkling against the snow. Small shops were decorated with wreaths, ribbons, and handmade signs. Bernice stopped at nearly every stall. Woo Sung watched her with amusement. "You're enjoying this?" "Of course. You were upset an hour ago. I can be upset and enjoy Christmas at the same time." "I'll remember that." At a small bakery, they bought cinnamon rolls and hot chocolate. Bernice took 1 bite and closed her eyes. "Oh, this is incredible." Woo Sung laughed. "You look happier than you did when you found out your flight was canceled." "That is because this is delicious." They sat outside beneath a covered wooden shelter. For a while, they watched families walking through the market. Children carried candy canes. Parents took photographs. Couples laughed as they struggled through the snow. Bernice suddenly became quiet. Woo Sung noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing. You're thinking about your parents." She nodded. "I just wish they were here." Woo Sung looked down at his untouched hot chocolate. "My grandmother used to take me to places like this." Bernice looked at him. "You were close." "Very." "What happened?" "She died several years ago." His voice softened. "She was the only person in my family who never cared about how much money I made." Bernice smiled gently. "She cared about who you were." "Yes." "What would she think of you now?" Woo Sung thought about it. "She'd probably tell me I work too much." Bernice laughed. "Your grandmother sounds like my mother. Maybe that's why I like talking to you." Bernice's smile faded into a shy expression. For a moment, their eyes met. Neither looked away. Then a loud bell rang from the center of the market. Bernice laughed nervously. "I think Christmas is interrupting us. Perhaps it knows we need to leave." "Leave for Wisconsin?" "Yes." They returned to the lodge and discovered that the highway had reopened. Within an hour, they were back on the road. The atmosphere inside the SUV had changed. They were no longer complete strangers. They talked more easily, laughed more often, and even argued playfully about music. Bernice insisted on playing Christmas songs. Woo Sung claimed he couldn't understand why anyone needed to hear the same songs every December. Because they're traditions, she argued. Or because people refuse to create new music. You're impossible. And yet you're still sitting here. She smiled. Unfortunately, several hours later, they crossed into Wisconsin. Bernice recognized the landscape immediately. Her heart began racing. I can't believe we're almost there. Woo Sung glanced at her. Are you excited? Terrified. Why? Because my mother is going to hug me until I can't breathe. Sounds dangerous. It is. He laughed. Then Bernice's phone rang. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. She's calling. Bernice answered. Mom. Her mother's voice came through, trembling with relief. Where are you, baby? Bernice looked at Woo Sung. I'm almost home. Her mother began crying. Bernice smiled through tears of her own. When the call ended, she turned toward Woo Sung. Thank you. He kept his eyes on the road. You don't have to thank me. I do. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, I'm glad I met you, Bernice. Her heart skipped. She looked out the window, hiding her smile. Neither of them knew what would happen after she reached her parents' house. But both were beginning to realize something important. The journey had started because Bernice needed a ride home. Somehow, along the way, it had become something neither of them wanted to end. Bernice knew they were close before she saw the familiar white house. The tall oak tree at the end of the street was still there. The little bookstore where she had spent countless Saturdays as a teenager still stood on the corner, its windows glowing with Christmas lights. Then she saw it. Her parents' house. A wreath hung on the front door, and colorful lights outlined the roof. Bernice pressed her hands against the window. That's it. Woo Sung slowed the SUV. You're home. She nodded, suddenly unable to speak. The moment he stopped in front of the house, the front door flew open. Her mother rushed outside wearing a thick sweater and slippers. Bernice! Bernice barely had time to open the door before her mother wrapped her in a tight embrace. Oh, my baby! Bernice laughed and cried at the same time. I missed you. Her father appeared behind her mother, pretending to look annoyed. You caused all this trouble just to arrive late? Bernice hugged him. You missed me too. I did not. You're crying. It's snow. Bernice laughed. Then her father noticed Woo Sung standing beside the SUV. He looked at Bernice. Who's that? Bernice suddenly remembered. Oh, Dad. Mom. This is Woo Sung. Her mother looked from Bernice to Woo Sung and then back to Bernice. A mischievous smile appeared on her face. Woo Sung. Mom. Did you meet him on the plane? No. Airport. It's complicated. Her father folded his arms. I'd like to hear the uncomplicated version. Woo Sung stepped forward politely. Mr. Davison, Mrs. Davison, it's a pleasure to meet you. Bernice needed a way home after her flight was canceled. I was driving toward Wisconsin, so I offered her a ride. Her father studied him. Then his expression softened. Well, any man who brings my daughter home safely in that storm is welcome at my table. Woo Sung looked surprised. I wouldn't want to impose. You drove all this way, Bernice's mother said. You're eating. Mom. No arguments. Within minutes, Woo Sung found himself sitting at the Davison family's dining table. The house smelled exactly as Bernice had described it. Roasted turkey, cinnamon, fresh bread, pine from the Christmas tree. Woo Sung looked around. Photographs covered one wall. Bernice as a little girl, Bernice in graduation robes, Bernice standing between her parents at different Christmases. He smiled. You have a beautiful home. Bernice's mother beamed. Thank you. Dinner was lively. Bernice's father asked Woo Sung about his work. When Woo Sung explained that he ran a technology company, Bernice nearly choked on her drink. Her father raised an eyebrow. A technology company? Yes, sir. How big? Woo Sung hesitated. Fairly large. Bernice laughed. That's his. Bernice had expected Woo Sung to disappear after Christmas. After all, their journey had begun because of a canceled flight and a snowstorm. He had been a stranger who happened to be traveling toward Wisconsin, and she had been a woman desperate to get home to her parents. That was all it was supposed to be. But Woo-sung stayed. The morning after Christmas, he joined Bernice's parents for breakfast. Her father showed him the workshop in the garage. Her mother packed enough food to feed him for a week, and Bernice watched in disbelief as the reserved billionaire CEO she had met on a snowy highway laughed with her parents like he had known them for years. When it was finally time for him to leave, Bernice walked him to the car. "So," she said, trying to sound casual, "I guess this is goodbye." Woo-sung looked at her for several seconds. "Do you want it to be?" Her heart skipped. "No. Good." He smiled. "Then it isn't." 2 weeks later, Bernice received a message from him. "I'm in town. Dinner?" She stared at the screen for nearly a minute before replying. "Only if you promise not to make me eat somewhere ridiculously expensive." His response came immediately. "I make no promises." Their first dinner date was at a beautiful restaurant overlooking the city. Bernice wore a deep emerald dress, while Woo-sung arrived in a dark suit without a tie. When he saw her, his expression changed. "You look beautiful." She smiled. "Thank you. You look like you own the restaurant." "I don't." "Are you sure?" He laughed. Dinner lasted much longer than either expected. They talked about everything. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, and the lives they had built before meeting each other. Bernice discovered that Woo-sung's enormous success had come with a price. He had spent years believing that achievement could replace companionship. Woo-sung discovered that Bernice had always been independent, but secretly longed for someone who would make her feel safe enough to stop carrying everything alone. Their second date was completely different. Woo-sung took her to a small family-owned restaurant. "No billion-dollar business meetings here?" Bernice teased. "No. No investors? No. No bodyguards?" He smiled. "Definitely no bodyguards." They shared dessert and laughed until the restaurant owner jokingly asked whether they planned to spend the entire night there. Their relationship slowly became something neither of them had expected. There were walks through snowy parks, quiet evenings talking on the phone, spontaneous trips, and countless messages throughout the day. Woo-sung began traveling to see Bernice whenever his schedule allowed. Bernice also visited him, slowly becoming familiar with his world. Then came the gala. Woo-sung invited her to a major charity gala hosted by his company. Bernice almost refused. "I don't belong at a room full of billionaires and executives." Woo-sung looked at her. "You belong wherever you choose to be." Those words stayed with her. That evening, Bernice arrived in a stunning midnight blue gown. When she entered the ballroom, conversations seemed to pause for a moment. Woo-sung was waiting for her. He smiled. "I was beginning to think I was overdressed." "You're not. You're beautiful." She shook her head. "You've said that 3 times tonight. I'll probably say it again." The gala was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung above hundreds of guests. Music floated through the room while waiters carried sparkling drinks and elegant appetizers. Woo-sung introduced Bernice to colleagues, investors, and friends. Some were surprised. Others clearly recognized that she wasn't simply another guest. She was important to him. Later that night, Woo-sung took her onto the balcony. The city stretched beneath them, filled with lights. Bernice held a glass of sparkling juice and leaned against the railing. "Do you ever get tired of this life?" "Sometimes." "Why don't you leave it?" "Because I spent years building it." "And now?" Woo-sung looked at her. "Now I'm learning that building a life is different from building a company." Bernice smiled. "What are you trying to build?" He stepped closer. "A future." Her heart fluttered. "With me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand. "With you." Months passed. Their relationship became stronger. They had disagreements, but they learned to talk through them. They discovered each other's habits and imperfections. Bernice learned that Woo-sung became quiet when overwhelmed. Woo-sung learned that Bernice needed reassurance when she was afraid she was being left behind. One evening, they went out for drinks with a few close friends. They laughed, told stories, and celebrated one of Woo-sung's biggest business achievements. Later, when they were alone, Bernice looked at him. Do you remember the first night we met? How could I forget? I thought you were suspicious. You were suspicious. You looked like a man who had never been told no. He laughed. You were the first woman who ever told me no before I even asked a question. Bernice smiled. And you were the stranger who turned a cancelled flight into the best journey of my life. Woo-sung became quiet. He took her hand. Bernice. Yes. Come with me. He led her outside. The night was cool and peaceful. They walked toward a small garden illuminated by hundreds of tiny lights. Bernice stopped. This is beautiful. Woo-sung turned toward her. Do you know what I remember most about that first journey? The snow. No. The airport. No. She smiled. Then what? You. He reached into his coat pocket. Bernice's smile disappeared when she saw the small velvet box. Woo-sung. He slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth. I spent most of my life believing that love was something that happened to other people, he said. I thought success meant having everything under control. Then a snowstorm changed my plans, and I met you. Tears filled Bernice's eyes. You taught me that the best things in life aren't always planned. Sometimes they arrive unexpectedly. Sometimes they come disguised as a cancelled flight, a long drive, and a stranger sitting beside you. He opened the box. Inside was a beautiful ring. I don't want to plan a life without you anymore. Bernice was crying now. Bernice Davison, will you marry me? She laughed through her tears. Yes. Woo-sung smiled with relief. Yes. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood. Bernice wrapped her arms around him, laughing as tears continued to fall. For a moment, everything around them seemed to disappear. There was no company, no airport, no storm, no distance between West Virginia and Wisconsin. Only two people who had found each other when neither was looking. Months earlier, Bernice had boarded a car because she desperately wanted to get home for Christmas. She never imagined that the unexpected journey would lead her somewhere even better. It led her to love. And when Woo-sung held her hand beneath the glowing lights, Bernice realized something she would remember for the rest of her life. Sometimes the journey that ruins your plans becomes the journey that changes your life forever. And sometimes, love really does appear when you least expect it. 6 months after Woo-sung proposed, Bernice stood in front of a mirror in a quiet bridal suite, staring at the woman reflected before her. For a moment, she could hardly believe how quickly everything had changed. She had once been a woman stranded in an airport, worried that a cancelled flight would keep her from spending Christmas with her parents. Now she was about to marry the man she had met because of that very storm. Her mother adjusted the delicate veil over Bernice's hair. You look beautiful. Bernice smiled. I'm nervous. That's normal. Her father appeared at the doorway. He looked at his daughter for a long moment before clearing his throat. Well, he said, pretending to remain composed. I suppose I'm going to have to let you go now. Bernice laughed. Dad. He walked toward her and gently kissed her forehead. Just remember one thing. You don't have to become someone else because you're marrying a wealthy man. You're still my little girl. Bernice's eyes filled with tears. I love you. I love you too. Then the music began. The doors opened. Bernice walked down the aisle. At the other end stood Woo-sung. He wore a classic black tuxedo, but the moment he saw her, the carefully composed CEO disappeared. He simply smiled. A genuine, emotional smile. Bernice reached him. You're staring, she whispered. I know. You're supposed to say something romantic. I forgot everything. She laughed softly. The ceremony was intimate and beautiful, surrounded by their families and closest friends. When it was time for their vows, Woo-sung took her hands. I met you on the worst travel day of your life, he said. You were frustrated, tired, and determined to get home. I thought I was simply helping a stranger. He smiled. I didn't know I was meeting the woman who would become my home. Bernice's eyes filled with tears. When it was her turn, she squeezed his hands. I thought the greatest gift that Christmas would be getting home to my parents. And it was. But I never imagined I'd also find the person I wanted to build my future with. She smiled. You weren't part of my plans, Woo-sung. But somehow, you became my favorite part of them. Their families applauded as they exchanged rings. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. You may kiss. Woo-sung smiled and gently kissed his bride. The room erupted in applause. Later that evening, they danced beneath hundreds of tiny lights. Bernice's father danced with her first. Her mother cried. Woo-sung's family welcomed Bernice warmly, and eventually everyone joined the dance floor. The celebration continued late into the night. But their favorite moment came after the guests had gone. Bernice and Woo-sung stood outside beneath the stars. So, Bernice said, we're actually married. We are. She looked at her ring. It feels unreal. Woo-sung took her hand. Then let's make it real. Their honeymoon began 2 days later. Woo-sung had planned a peaceful getaway to a beautiful coastal resort where they could finally escape their busy lives. For the first time since their relationship began, there were no business meetings, no family obligations, and no schedules. Just the two of them. Their days were simple. They walked along the beach in the mornings. They explored little restaurants. They watched the sunset together. One afternoon, Bernice convinced Woo-sung to rent bicycles. He immediately regretted agreeing. You said this would be relaxing, he complained. It is relaxing. You're going too fast. Bernice laughed. You're a billionaire CEO afraid of a bicycle? I am not afraid. You look afraid. He shook his head. You are impossible. She smiled. And yet you married me. Best decision I ever made. That evening, they sat outside their hotel room, watching the sun disappear into the ocean. Bernice rested her head against his shoulder. Do you ever think about that first night? Every Christmas. The airport. The car. The snow. You. She smiled. I was so worried that I'd miss Christmas. You did. She looked up at him. What? You missed the Christmas you planned. He took her hand. But you found the life you didn't plan. Bernice smiled. That sounds like something from a romance novel. Maybe our life is one. She leaned against him. I like the ending. Woo-sung looked at her. It's not the ending. She smiled. No. He shook his head. It's the beginning. They stayed there quietly as the waves rolled toward the shore. The journey that had begun with a canceled flight had taken them through snow-covered highways, family dinners, first dates, celebrations, uncertainty, and finally a wedding. And now, beneath a peaceful evening sky, they began their new life together. Bernice had once believed she was simply trying to get home for Christmas. She hadn't realized that the greatest journey of her life was waiting for her somewhere along the road. And as Woo-sung held her hand, she knew she had finally found home. Not in a place, but in a person. Their honeymoon ended with one final sunrise. They stood barefoot on the beach, watching the morning light spread across the water. Woo-sung slipped his hand into hers. Ready to go home, Mrs. Kong? Bernice smiled. Only if you promise me one thing. What? No more canceled flights. He laughed. I promise. She leaned against him. Good. Because I think we've already had enough unexpected journeys. Woo-sung kissed her forehead. I'm not promising that. She looked at him suspiciously. Why? Because if our first unexpected journey brought me to you, he smiled. I wouldn't mind a few more. Bernice laughed. Together, they walked along the shore as the sun rose behind them. Their wedding was over. Their honeymoon was ending. But their story was only beginning. And this time, neither of them needed a map to know where they were going. They were going forward together. Red Heart. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you on our next epic story. Please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss our next release.